All right, so Donna, we've had a lot of questions come in about genes and testing your genes, and we wanted to bring you in today to help us answer those questions and dig in and find a little bit more out about genes so that people are more comfortable with the process. You know, some people are beginning and just discovering this whole new area of genetic testing, and we want to know a little bit more about what they are and what we need to do to get tested. So thanks for being here with us today.
Okay, I hope I can answer the questions, and I'm happy to try.
I'm sure you'll be able to. You know, a lot of people want to know just in general, what is genetic testing? What is it?
Well, we have about 20,000, a little bit maybe over 20,000 genes, and they mapped out the genes of the human being quite some time ago now. And as soon as and so it was very expensive initially, like thousands and thousands of dollars, maybe even 100,000 initially, but the prices come way, way down. So that 23andMe jumped into the market first and began to offer gene tests for $99 if you just wanted ancestry, or $199 if you wanted health information. So basically, you take a little bit of saliva. They send you, if you go to 23andMe, and you give them their email, and they send you a little kit with a little vial. You spit in it, you send it back. About 6 weeks later, they will send you an email saying that your results are in, and then you can get this information about your ancestry. But I always say there's so much information, priceless information hidden in your DNA. So if you have a way of getting it out and looking at it, you can learn all kinds of things about yourself. Most importantly, I think, is how you should be eating. So there's a lot of controversy about, should we be keto? Should we be paleo? Should we have some carbs in our diet? Well, it's all right there in your genes. And some people say, well, I don't really know. I want to know anything about my genes. I might find out that I have a risk for cancer or diabetes or some heart disease, whatever. But everybody has a risk for those diseases if we don't understand what we're doing. So inside of every single cell in our body is the exact same DNA. What happens is the cells in our liver have the same genes as the cells in our muscles or our brain, but they're expressed differently. There's triggers that turn on certain parts of the DNA that make the liver cells do liver stuff, detoxify, for example, and brain cells do brain stuff, like make neurotransmitters, for example. But every single cell has the same 20,000 plus, more or less. They don't know exactly how many, but exactly the same DNA in every single cell, which is pretty fascinating.
So that's great, and that brings up the question then, are there different types of tests? Do I need to do one test if I just want my ancestry information, and another if I want to learn about what diet's right for me or what I'm at risk for, or is it all the same test, or do I need to go to different places to get this?
Well, 23andMe originally started off providing a lot more genes, and then over time they came out with version 5 and first version 4, now version 5. The version 5, they're giving you less information about yourself. There are other companies like Self-Decode, for example. They are about to release, so they have a gene test too, and you can go to selfdecode.com and you can order their test kit. There's other companies out there now with their own test kits, and what they're providing is what they have made up basically is a chip. And on that chip are a whole bunch of genes. So the new Self-Decode one that will be out at the end of February, it has many more genes on it than 23andMe is providing. Now, you can imagine with 23,000 genes, there's a lot of genes we know nothing about. And there are quite a few genes, really pertinent, useful genes that we do know something about, and that researchers have verified over and over and again that this gene does this. And for example, in the liver, you have your about 52 CYP450 genes. Those are the genes in the liver that do various things, like they detoxify poisons, drugs, aspirin, hormones. So, there's those genes. And then you're getting that kind of information from them. Now,
Okay.
the ones that are most heavily researched are available to us. Now, I'm a very big believer that you can go to one of these companies that will do a gene test for you, and then they'll send you a report and tell you a bunch of stuff about yourself, maybe 20, 30 pages of information about you, including diet usually, like you should be a low carb diet.
So each company might have a complete different set of things that they're looking at, right? You're not going to necessarily get the same thing from each company.
Well, actually, the thing is that most of the companies are giving you the exact same information, but there are reports like the one that I've developed, for example, where a practitioner is trained to. So I have a software program, and we pull those genes on a chip into the software program, and it populates it into different, what I call buckets or categories. There's one on genes for detoxification, on gut health, on brain and neurotransmitters, and stress and sleep. So your practitioner that you're working with, or if you are a practitioner, you would have this information, and you could sit there and either over the phone or in a live face-to-face conversation, you could begin to discuss what I call you look for someone's Achilles heels. Now, this is getting back to what I said. Like some people say, I don't want to know where my weaknesses are. However, if you know what your weaknesses are, you can totally prevent them, because the genes are basically just sitting there waiting for a signal. Something I think is important to understand is that DNA, our genes basically in all of our cells, can be easily damaged. Nobody thinks about this. All the really bad oils that we consume, all those processed foods, all the chemicals that we eat on a regular basis, all the glyphosate, for example, that everyone's concerned about, the toxins in the air and the water and so on, all that stuff that's just part of our life today, unless you take care of yourself, all those things are damaging our DNA. And this is why we do get cancer. This is why we do age. If we can, so we have our scientists have a very, very good idea of why we are aging, and they're really beginning to make extraordinary progress on how to reverse that. But it very much comes down to reversing the damage in the DNA. Now, the body is in running, the normal metabolism of the body, certain things are made like superoxide and hydrogen peroxide and homocysteine and so on. Those natural processes in the body, the body produces those, but then it also has enzymes or genes that come along and negate them or turn them into something else. But the body also has repair mechanisms built in, so it can repair our genes if you're doing all the good things that we know to do. Really important to sleep and exercise. Diet's extremely important. So we can repair our DNA by how we eat and how we live. Exercise and good sleep and all that is like, what they call epigenetics. These things are working on the genes, causing them to be properly expressed. Now, the great thing about knowing this information is that there's a prediction there. You do have a risk for potentially having diabetes or becoming insulin resistant. You do have, you're not good at detoxifying. And as soon as you know that, you can begin to do things to prevent that from really being a problem. In other words, now you have a strength that you didn't have before, a power you didn't have before. So I always like to say that we can predict, prevent, and then personalize a diet and a lifestyle to keep us really healthy, keep the DNA from being damaged, preventing things like aging and cancer, for example. So it's a very, very new power that we have that we didn't have before. So it's really exciting. Something don't be afraid, be excited.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love the 3 Ps. That really helps you like, help that thing sink in
Predict,
to
yeah,
realize,
predict it, predict the
prevent
potential
it.
problem, prevent it from happening, and personalize your diet. So this is our
Yeah.
future. There isn't going to be
Mhm.
everybody should be keto or vegetarian or whatever, and all that argument will finally stop. And
Mhm.
everything will be about you and your personalized diet.
Mhm. So people don't need to be worried about it, do they? I mean, is there certain companies we should look for a sign or a symbol or some kind of, logo that says this is secure, my DNA is secure, or we don't really need to worry about it? What you hear talk of that. I guess I'm just wondering, I want to throw it out there. Do we need to be concerned, or are there things people can do to, if they are concerned about that, is there something they can do when they're taking their test to help, with
Well,
that?
from my several years of looking at people's genes and my personal experience, I can say that I haven't found anything yet that there's not a workaround for. And it's so amazing because it always comes down to the basics. How much stress do you have in your life? If you have certain genes that make you be one of those people that are easily stressed, when you get stressed, you stay stressed for a really long time. You can't clear that stress. That's actually probably the number one place to start working. Like knowing yourself. Gosh, I am somebody when I'm stressed out, uh, I can't get rid of that stress. And so I go to bed at night. I'm still like, my mind is going over things and over. I don't get a good night's sleep. Let's say then you say, okay, I'm going to start taking CBD, or it's so popular right now, or holy basil, or, there are ways to help you bring that. Like holy basil is a wonderful Ayurvedic herb that has been used for thousands and thousands of years, like 6,000 years. It was revered herb for in Ayurvedic medicine. But why? Because it's wonderful for lowering cortisol, which goes up when we're stressed out. So that's an example of a workaround of a gene or category of genes that you find that there's a big, what I call Achilles heel. That's your Achilles heel, or one of them. And here's
Mm-hmm.
ways to fix it. You might say, I really, really need to take 30 minutes every day to sit down and meditate. Or if you don't want to meditate, just sit there quietly and breathe, if you don't want to call it
Mm-hmm.
meditating. But that can make, and I mean, that's why people find out that, or say all the time, meditation has changed my life, because just giving them a chance to bring that
Sure.
cortisol down and reset for the day.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So can anybody of any age take a test, or is it limited to certain age groups, or who can
Well,
take
the
the
thing
test?
is, a baby's not going to be able to spit into a little tube, obviously, or even some 4 and 5-year-olds won't do it. Some of the testing companies have a swab, so you can just swab. They just need some of your DNA. Some people say, well, I don't want anyone to have my DNA. Well, it's very easy to get. They can go take a glass that you drank out of and, get your DNA off of that. So it's a little hard to protect your DNA from somebody who really wants the information. So swabs, are for babies, and of course you can get your DNA from someone's blood. I would highly bet on the fact that within the next 5 years they'll actually start to find out the DNA of every baby being born and hand that to the parents and say, "Here's your baby, and here's his Achilles heels, and here's her strengths. They're there too. It's not just your problems. It's also where you're strong." And so you can play to that. You can start your baby off eating right from the very beginning, and if that's a baby that is going to have a lot of stress, then you can make sure that they're in play environments where or even just the way you talk to them, that you are, even coping mechanisms, to help them quickly unwind. Like babies, not babies, but little children can be taught to meditate. So there's classes for children for yoga, for example. You would know your child and have a much better idea of how to steer them through life. So I think it's going to be all humans if they want it. I mean, a parent can say, I don't want to know. And I think that's a foolish decision.
Yeah, interesting. So is it covered by insurance then, or is it something people have
Not
to pay
yet.
for out of pocket? Not
Yeah,
yet.
not
Okay.
yet. But you're not talking about a lot of money here. You only have to do it once. let's say you pay the $99 or $199 even, and for the rest of your life, you know those genes, they don't change. What
Mm-hmm.
changes is whether they're turned off and they're turned on appropriately. That's by what you eat and by your lifestyle. But the genes themselves are fixed from the minute that you're conceived. So once you get this test, you have it forever. Now, if you go to 23andMe and they're only going to report on, say, 600 genes, I forget the number lately, but we don't need to know all of them. There's certain ones that are more researched that are very valuable to know. And a lot of researchers around the world have verified that this is what these genes do. And I think certain categories, especially diet, is one of the most valuable categories to know. Again, as I mentioned, stress, how you handle stress. Do you have issues with sleep? For example, I have a copy of this gene called AANAT, and that's the gene that turns serotonin into melatonin. So I just don't get sleepy at night. I think when I was little, no, you know what, come to think of it, I would be one of those kids that I get under the cover and read. I just didn't want to go to bed. And so a little bit of melatonin, like even just 1 milligram or one of those droppers where you put 10 drops is 1 milligram. 30, 45 minutes later, I started getting sleepy, and then it helps you fall asleep. So that's an example of a gene that can cause a problem, but then there's a workaround for it. So it's really good to know that, I think.
Yeah, that's great. That's really important information. And you think of how that would affect your child at school then, and everything else that they're doing. So that's great too. I can see the value in that. So we don't really need to worry. Some people are debating, are they able to patent my genes? Do I need to worry about that? But it sounds like you're saying this is kind of the future, and there's so much benefit there that we might be better off knowing and doing something about what we can do. And if they really wanted to, they would be able to get our genes anyway. I don't know if there's anything we can say there about that debate, but
well, I have not found one single
there.
person yet that wasn't excited to have their genes interpreted for them. And usually they know, let's think, well, for example, there's the CYP, that's the liver, one of the liver genes, P450. So CYP1A2, that tells you, if you have a variant there, that you don't clear caffeine. So let's say you go out to dinner and you decide to have a little chocolate mousse, and you notice at 3 o'clock in the morning you're still wide awake because you didn't clear that caffeine, or you are one of these people that are drinking 5 cups of coffee a day to keep your energy up. Then you're never going to really, really rest. But a lot of times people will say, oh, I'm not surprised I don't drink coffee. I notice it makes me feel very wired. Now, if somebody is pregnant, or it's not a good time to have caffeine, by the way, or they are really trying to rebuild their energy because, the so-called adrenal fatigue concept, where they're really tired, chronic fatigue and all, caffeine isn't good, especially for the people that have these CYP1A2 variants. So, and the other thing that I hear all the time, I've had people, even some very well-known thought leaders in our field, say, oh, I'm not talking about that yet because it's not ready for prime time. Well, I totally disagree with that, because the genes that we are reporting on, and particularly the ones related to diet, nutritional genomic genes, they're not new. Nutritional genomics is more than 30 years old, meaning that dietitians and researchers have been looking at these genes for 30 years now. So when we say CYP1A2 is a problem for caffeine, that's not new information. They've known that for a really long time. So I think the genes that we're reporting on are very useful, and that this whole new science, this tool basically, is a very valuable one that's very much ready for prime time. If people listen to a summit that I did called the Genius of Your Gene Summit, I feel pretty certain that they'll agree with me, because they'll realize that these experts that I've interviewed clearly are using this tool to get drag up amazing information. It's very, very helpful. I did an interview with Carolyn Ladowski, for example, and she has a wall full of babies for helping women who couldn't get pregnant for years. They were tried IVF, failed many times, which is a very sad, very expensive process. And then they come to her and she looks at their genes. I personally had this experience myself, actually, looking at where what I call their person's Achilles heel are supporting that. It always seems to be easy to do. 2-3 months later, you get an email saying, guess what, we're pregnant. So, and Carolyn has a whole wall full of babies because that's her specialty. And then you tell me that we're not ready for prime time. That's not true.
Yeah, that's so true. So you hear the word SNP thrown around a lot, and I'm just wondering if you could quickly explain what is that, and is that something we're going to be looking for in the report, or what is a SNP, and what do we need to know about it?
Yeah, it stands for single nucleotide polymorphism, meaning there's a change in so it would be like you were learning to read, and there's a word called CAT, which says cat, and you change the T to a B, so now it's saying cab. So it's a whole different meaning. Here's a cat, here's a cab. And that's what a SNP is, a variation. It has different names. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as an allele, ALLELLE. Sometimes people say a SNP, and sometimes people say a variation. I like the word variation because clearly, that makes sense to people's minds. Like, oh, I have a variation in my gene. It's not a mutation, like Down syndrome, for example, at all. It just means, and we have millions of these variations, that's normal. And we all have millions of them. So they're not bad. They're just interesting information about you that makes you you. Like, why do you have this personality and your brother doesn't have that personality? Or you have blue eyes and everybody else in your family has brown eyes, just because of these variations.
Okay, so it's nothing that we need to be afraid of. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but knowing what they are can help us figure out that third P, and personalize what we need to be doing. So it will.
Well, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of a scary gene, BRCA1, BRCA2. So the BRCA gene, the P53 gene, these are genes that turn off cancer. So we're always getting cancer forming in our body all the time. These rampant cells that are misbehaving. And these genes, BRCA and P53, are examples of what are called tumor suppressor genes. They won't let cancer get out of control. But if you have a variant in BRCA or in P53, then you don't have these genes working for you to suppress this tumor growth. So you might find out that you have BRCA, as Angelina Jolie did. And so she did, she had her breasts removed. And that was a big scare. I actually had people calling me saying, oh, I have this gene. My sister had breast cancer. I'm really not sure what to do. But here's an interesting fact. Before 1940, which is actually when things really began to change in the world. Baby boomers, the wars ended, baby boomers were coming in. That's when the awful TV dinners and terrible foods really, that's all we ate, basically. So that's when breast cancer started really showing up. People with the BRCA gene began to, have cancer. So we made that cancer. We made more cancer in our body. So the gene wasn't there to protect us. But it wasn't that the gene was the problem. It was that the way we were eating and living was the problem. So, you could go ahead and say, okay, I'm not going to change my diet. I'm going to drink Diet Coke every day and eat all these awful oils. And I have this gene, so maybe I should have my breasts removed. But then go ahead and remove your uterus and your ovaries. And, where does it stop, really? Because cancer can form anywhere. So, I think, now, did the press tell us that? Removing your ovaries, for example, means, and your uterus means a drop in oxytocin. So then you're not so affectionate and loving anymore. Oxytocin is a really important hormone for bonding. So there are consequences to removing organs. But a better decision, a better choice would be to say, okay, I'm at risk, more at risk than my sister has, who doesn't have these genes. So I'm going to really be careful about eating a really bad diet. Like, I'm not going to eat your typical American diet. I'm going to eat lots of cruciferous vegetables. You can take a supplement called DIM, D-I-M. Those are what protect people from these, from breast cancer, for example. Miso soup is fantastically protective against breast cancer. So there are definitely workarounds. And that's where I personally feel very strongly. I created this program called Butterfly Genomics, which I'll explain why I call it that. But I want to train practitioners to know the body ecology way of life and how to read these genes and then the workarounds for them. Because I think we have, well, I've been in this field for a really long time, and I think I have a deep understanding of how to do these workarounds. And but there's a huge need for practitioners, and it's great to find one that's trained properly and then begin to work together with that person. You don't have to know all your genetic variants issues at once. You can, but then maybe take one category, like find out that, say, one Achilles heel is detoxification. Okay, what would you do to start getting rid of your old toxins that you've been accumulating for 25 or 50 years? It also explains why you may be sicker than other people, and then start working on that particular aspect of your health because you've had this genetic weakness all your life. So it's extraordinary to me. I always say, if you get into this, you will be bitten by the gene bug, and that's it. You just keep going down this path, learning more and more and more, and being able to really help people. So it's like, you have to know this information. It's kind of like having a cake, and this is the icing on the cake, but the cake's much more delicious with the icing on it.
Ah, perfect. I love that analogy. And you gave us an example of those 3 Ps and kind of answered all of the what's and whys to this, and addressed that it's really not anything to be afraid of or anything we're not ready for. We've been ready because, like you said, we've been doing this for 30 years, as long as you've been doing this, and you've had that same, thing that you've been teaching everybody for years, is that principle of uniqueness, and this provides that piece to the puzzle that really helps each individual.
Yeah, it's not that we don't, like, if we had learned about nutritional genomics and genetics and all, say 30 years ago, but we hadn't progressed to where we are, and we know so much about what the body needs, so much more about diet, for example, how important exercise is. If this had come out 30 years ago, we wouldn't have had the workarounds. But today, if you're trained well, you know what the workarounds are. It's just extraordinary. It's just an amazing tool. So the timing is also perfect. Now, I think a lot of people are afraid. They'll think, well, this is a complicated field. I don't know if I can learn it. If you've had, so I've had a lot of courses, and I have been in room full of, say, doctors and other professionals, and they're sitting there learning this, but where I found that there was a real hole, which is why I started to do butterfly genomics, is that they're kind of jumping in, like in high school. Like if you went to school and you started to go to high school before you ever did grade school, it's harder for you. So we need to kind of go to grade school and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on grades, learn it, and then learn that. And then you can keep adding, onto your knowledge. But I feel like many other programs out there are not starting where it's really important to start. Diet is really important to start. Looking at a person's detoxification genes are really important. Helping them understand their personality because they have certain genes. That's very basic too. Anyway, and then of course you can look at the genes, but what are you going to do about it? Well, you can get out of school with a degree in genetics even, but all those years, like in my case, more than 30 years, because obviously I started teaching 30 years ago. I started learning long before that because I was sick, wanted to find out why, how to get well. So I've been trying to figure things out for a long time. So you can't just come out of school and have all that knowledge to be able to help people, with these workarounds. Yeah. That's what I want to teach. And that's what's not being taught in the typical courses that professionals are getting today.
Right. Wonderful. Well, this is very helpful to just go through and and have an explanation for some of these basic things that I know people have been wondering a lot about. We just thank you so much for all the work you do, and we're really looking forward to this program. It sounds very exciting. So
I
we'll
didn't
have to
say
have
what.
everybody stay tuned.
Well, I didn't say what butterfly genomics stands for. The butterfly, before it's a butterfly, it's a caterpillar. And it's cute, fuzzy little thing, but it's kind of grounded, just can't go anywhere. And then it goes into this period of time and it comes out and it's beautiful and it can fly. And so that's what I want people to understand, is that when we know our genes, we can transform and really, really, really reach our highest potential. So it's a very good thing. It's not just looking about, here's my faults. It's about looking, where are my strengths?
Yes. Oh, that is beautiful. That's a beautiful analogy, and to think about it that way. And like you always say, there's a front and a back to everything, but we can focus on the front side and what it's doing, and then blossom and grow and take off from that.
Anything that comes along, any food, for example, you should look for its positive side, but always be sure to look for the negative side. We didn't do that with antibiotics. We thought, wow, this is the end of all disease. But we didn't look and see, well, is there any side effect or back to the antibiotic? And then now we know that, yes, it destroys our microbiome, which is super important. By the way, the microbes in our gut have their own genes. They have, the trillions of microbes are providing trillions of genetic information and genetic power to your body. So once the scientists mapped out the fact that we had about 20-something thousand genes, they thought, well, how is this complicated human body running? And now today they understand that all the microbes in our gut, they're actually doing most of the heavy lifting. What they do, they talk to our genes, our own genes, and our genes talk back to them. And they're actually doing things, producing things, for example, that our own body can't produce. So they're very, very important. So my whole program is really a gut smart and gene smart way of life.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for the explanation and for talking to us today about our genes. And I know we're going to be getting a lot more information from you in the future about that. And we look forward to Butterfly. I can't wait.
Yeah, me too. I want everybody to be bitten by the gene bug. Thank you, Roxanne.
Yep. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.